So to summarize where we are so far, if I decide to play a card as for its campaign points, the first alternative I have is to campaign in the states. The second alternative I have is to advertise in any region on the board. The third alternative I have when I play a card for its campaign points is to position on the issues. So if I decide to play my 4 campaign points to position on the issues, I can spend one of those 4 to place a support cube on any issue I like. Let's say I chose defense. Now I could spend my second of 4 campaign points on issues by just putting another cube on a different issue, let's say economy. If I wanted to put another support cube in defense within the same phase, it costs 2 instead of 1. So I've spent 1 on defense, 1 on economy, and I could spend my final remaining 2 to put 1 more in defense. Now in a future phase, the next cube I put in defense will only cost 1, but when you put a second cube on an issue which you've already spent one of your campaign points within the same phase, it costs 2. So as with the states and as with advertising, there can only be 1 color cube on each of these issues. So if Kennedy had 2 on defense, I could, if I'm coming in here and spending 4 campaign points on the issues, I could use 1 to remove 1 blue cube from defense. Now I want to remove that second cube from defense, but because I'm playing my second cube on the same issue within the same phase, it costs me 2. So to remove this, it would cost me 2. So how does it benefit you to have support cubes on an issue? Well, many of the events in the game benefit the person who is leading on an issue. So one of the events might say the leader in defense gets to add so many support to a given state. Well, because I have a support cube on defense, I lead in defense, so I get to execute that event. Also, having support in an issue gives me rewards later on in the momentum phase of this turn in the form of momentum markers and endorsements. We'll see those in just a minute. So to summarize where we are so far, in each phase of the normal turns, each player is going to play 1 card from their hand. The one that goes first is determined by the preliminary initiative. When you play a card, you can either play it for the event or the campaign points. When you play it as the campaign points, you have the option of playing all of the campaign points either in campaigning in states, advertising in any region, or positioning on the issues. You have to spend all of the campaign points in one of those 3 areas. You can't split them up and say, I'm going to spend 1 campaign point campaigning in states and other ones positioning on the issues. You either have to spend them all campaigning in states, advertising in a region, or positioning on the issues. Whether you play it for the campaign points or the event, you gain the number of rest cubes that are stated on the card. You do have one other option. If you don't want to play any cards in your hand for their campaign point value or the event, the other option you have is to play your candidate card for the number of campaign points on it, which is always 5. And you can use those campaign points in the normal way of campaigning in states, advertising in a region, or campaigning on the issues. Once you use your candidate card in the game, it's flipped over to the exhausted side and can't be used again. But there are certain cards in the game that have events that allow you to turn it back up, so it can be used again. So within a given turn, each player is going to play 5 cards, and then it's going to go into the momentum phase. There are 4 things that happen in the momentum phase. The first thing is momentum decay. You remember that each candidate has these momentum markers, but during the momentum phase, you have to get rid of half of your momentum markers rounded down. So if I have 2 momentum markers when the momentum phase comes up, I have to get rid of one of them. The second thing that happens in the momentum phase are momentum awards and endorsements. These relate to who has support cubes on issues on the issues track. So for the 3rd place issue, if anyone has any support cubes there, they get 1 momentum. So the Kennedy player would get 1 momentum marker. The 2nd place issue, if anyone has any support cubes there, they get a momentum marker or an endorsement. We haven't talked about endorsements yet, so let's see what they're about. Let's say that the Kennedy player chose to get the endorsement instead of the another momentum marker. So when you get an endorsement award, what you do is you draw an endorsement card from the endorsements deck, and it'll tell you a region that you'll get an endorsement for. So the Kennedy player gets an endorsement in the Midwest. So you take one of the endorsement markers and place it in the Midwest endorsement area. Finally, the first place issue gets one momentum marker and one endorsement marker. Since the Nixon player has a support cube there, he gets one momentum marker as well as one endorsement. Let's say that the Nixon player drew an endorsement card and it was an endorsement in the Midwest. Endorsements are just like state support and advertising and the issues. There can only be one color endorsement in a given region. So if the Nixon player drew an endorsement in the Midwest, he would have to use that endorsement to remove the Kennedy endorsement that's there. The third thing that happens in the momentum phase is that each issue loses one support cube if there are any there. So in this case, all of these cubes would come off. The fourth and final thing that happens in the momentum phase is issue shift. The player with the most cubes of advertising support on the entire board gets to shift the issues on the issues track. So in this case, let's assume that there was just one Nixon support cube in advertising in the East, and there was no other advertising cubes on the board. Nixon leads the number of advertising cubes, so he gets the option to switch the issues on the issues track. The way you can shift the issues is that any two adjacent issues can switch. In this case, the Nixon player could switch defense and economy, or he could switch economy and civil rights. He may choose to switch economy and civil rights. So now defense is priority 1, civil rights is priority 2, and economy is priority 3. Again, remember the priority is important because the higher the priority of the issue and you have support in that issue, the more rewards in the form of momentums and endorsements you're going to get. So that does it for the momentum phase. Now you move into the campaign strategy and rest phase of this turn. So if you remember at the beginning of the turn, we were dealt 6 cards. And we've played 5 phases. I would have probably have played 5 of these cards. Or I may have played fewer because of special events or something. But at this point, I have to play 1 card to my campaign strategy notebook area. So most of the time I'll be down to 1 card, so I'll just play that to the campaign strategy area. So in the first 5 turns, when you're dealt 6 cards, you're going to play 1 card to the campaign strategy deck at this phase. On turns 7 and 8, you'll be dealt 7 cards, and you'll play 2 cards to the campaign strategy deck. If for some reason you still have cards left in your hand, they get discarded at this point. There is one type of card I forgot to mention when I was going over the various card types, and that's these gathering momentum cards. These gathering momentum cards will have a region, so this is gathering momentum in the South. Whichever player is currently leading the most states in the said region gets to add 1 state support cube in any state that doesn't have any cubes of any color. The reason I mention this now is that when you're playing cards to the campaign strategy deck, you can't play these gathering momentum cards. So they have to be played during one of the 5 phases of the turn. If for some reason that's the only card that you have left when the campaign strategy phase comes up, then you just have to discard that card and you'll have to deal with what you have in your campaign strategy deck. Now you may be asking yourselves, well, how will I know which card to save to play into my campaign strategy deck? The campaign strategy deck of cards is going to be used during the special debate and election day turns. And you'll have to wait and see the special rules for those turns to get the strategy of what cards you should be playing to your campaign strategy deck. But that's coming up soon. The second thing that happens during this last phase of a turn is the rest. So during the phases, as you're playing cards, you'll gain those rest cubes and they'll be put into your coffee mug. It's at this point that you take all of those cubes and put them into the political capital bag. So Nixon places all of his rest cubes in there and Kennedy places all of his rest cubes in there. So that ends turn 1. We reset the phase track to step 1 and increase the turn track to turn 2. And we're going to repeat the phases for turn 2, go through 5 turns with each player playing a card, going through the momentum phase, and the campaign strategy and rest phase. And we're going to do that 4 more times for turns 2, 3, 4, and 5, and then we come to the debates turn. The debates turn doesn't go through these normal phases. It has its own set of rules. So let's take a look at the debates now. Through turns 1 through 5, the issues on the issues track may have switched places and gained and lost support by both players. Then you're going to set the debate board out on the table between the 2 players, and the debate board has 3 spaces. One for the first place issue, second place, and third place issue. So you're just going to move the issues from the issues track in their current positions onto the debate board. So defense in position 1 will go here for the first place, civil rights to the second place, and economy to the third place. You'll just keep the support cubes on the tile. They won't come into play during the debates, but they will just return to the issues track with the issues tiles. Also on turns 1 through 5, each player has been playing a card at the end of the phases to their campaign strategy decks. So at this point, each player will just collect their campaign strategy cards to be played in this turn. So here's Kennedy's campaign strategy for the debates, and here's Nixon's campaign strategy for the debates. The first thing that happens during the debates is an initiative check. So cubes are drawn from the initiative bag until you get 2 cubes of the same color. So in this case, Nixon won the initiative check, so he will have the initiative during the debates turn. Before the debates actually start, you'll want to remember to go up here to the persistent events at the top of the map board and collect all of the debate events that have been played in turns 1 through 5. You'll want to read the event text and see all of what special rules are going to be in play during the debates. Now each player is going to select one of the cards from this campaign strategy deck to be played on the first round of the debates. Then simultaneously these cards will be flipped up. The 2 icons on the lower left hand corner of the card are what's important here. So the card that the Nixon player played is the economy issue for the Nixon side. So the Nixon player will place this on the Nixon side of the debate board on the economy issue line. The card the Kennedy player played has the defense symbol, so it will go on the defense issue, but the candidate icon is both of them, both the Democrat and the Republican icon is shown. So the Kennedy player gets the option to play this on either side of the defense issue. The Kennedy player may decide to play the card on his side of the defense issue. If both players play cards with both candidate icons, then the player with the initiative plays their card first. So now it's time for the second round of the debates. So again, each player chooses a card from their campaign strategy deck and then simultaneously reveals it. So the Nixon player played his own icon to defense, so he has to put it on the defense line. The Kennedy player played his own icon to the defense issue, so he has to play it here. Now once you have 2 cards played to one side of a particular issue, that issue is said to be won. And what you do is you sum up the total campaign points on each side. So Kennedy has 4 plus 2 is 6 to Nixon's 4. So in this case, Kennedy wins the defense issue. So what does Kennedy get for winning the first issue? Kennedy gets 2 state support cubes that he can place in any state on the board. The defense issue is then moved back to the issues track at the lowest position. The cards played to the defense issue are moved to the discard pile. You then go on to the next round of the debates, doing the same thing by playing a card from your campaign strategy deck, simultaneously revealing it and putting it on the appropriate side. If you draw a card for an issue that's already won, then you just have to discard the card. The player who wins the second debate issue gets 3 state support cubes that they can place on any state on the board. So the second issue one goes back to the second place on the issues track. And then the player who wins the last issue in the debate gets 4 state support cubes that they can place on any state on the board.